Welcome to Archiproducts Design Talks 2023. Sorry for the little delay. We got one of our panelists who will be joining us soon. He's currently stuck in traffic, but he will be making it probably on time. So sorry again for the delay. So Archiproducts Design Talks is a series of interactive and insightful conversations, a moment of reflection on some relevant topics with some of the most inspiring voices in architecture and design. Today we'll be speaking about space, and in particular about how artificial intelligence is shaping and will continue to change the way we think, the way we live, the way we work and create. Artificial intelligence is getting better all the time, and it can do some pretty amazing and quite scary stuff. From writing a story just like a human, to coding, writing a business plan. It can even pass university exams. In the near future, it will be impossible to distinguish between a human-created and an artificially made content, including video, images, audio, and text. But what does this mean to us? What does it mean to the architecture and design practice, broadly intended? We'll be unpacking this vast and intriguing topic with our panelists, each with their own hands-on experience in the daily practice, and each one with their own sensibility and cultural difference, but all with the same level of curiosity and attention. So let me introduce you our panelist, Cino Zucchi, founder of Cino Zucchi Architects, Carlos Bagnon, associate professor of architecture and design at Singapore University of Technology and Design, and co-founder of Sub-Architecture Design, Davide Angeli, deputy managing director at MDL Circle. Tim Fu will join us soon. So why don't we start with you, Cino, and we'd be very curious to learn a little bit about your experience with innovation and research in your daily practice.
Thanks. The theme is one of the most hot at the time. You know, I just reading this book. It's called Superintelligence by Bostrom, and he's with some scary issues about artificial intelligence, but the theme also leads me back to my youth, quite unexpectedly. So I prepare a series of images that they look a little bit like a photo album of my story, but that will touch some problems that I think are quite big. So of all the definition of intelligence, because the question is what is intelligence, one that I like the most is also the ability to change strategy when one strategy is failing. You know, in a way, a bee or a flea hits the glass many times because she goes toward the light, but then a dog will sooner or later make the round. I like this definition. But being myself an old age man, in the progression of age, I'm quite old, so I don't know if I will see all the developments. My kids will see it. I've been educated as a quite normal child, you know, in a very different age from here. Maybe some LGBT, you know, my pink pajama would foresee some prophecies of today. LGBTQ, I would define myself as a Q, but whatever. And in 1973, doing my final of high school, I took a bus and went to Afghanistan. This is me in Kandahar, sleeping in the road. But one year before, while I was going to Afghanistan, I bought myself this book. It was The Limits to Growth. It was the foundation of what we could call now the environmental emergency. I got really, really scared of this book. And I applied to MIT, and I went to MIT. This was the original algorithm connecting all the system, agriculture, economics, like this, which the MIT team used to do this simulation, which foresees some kind of catastrophe around year 2000 now. And I find out the other day, my book is Shinozuki Artificial Intelligence, 1977, and actually I learned how to program in Lisp. I had as professors Marvin Minsky and Douglas Hofstadter in 2 different times, and this is Lisp, I will not explain what it is, and all the kind of search. What was at that time thought as improbable, today you can just click a button and have it. It's amazing how much everything went. At that time, also at MIT, you have this Nicolas de Groponte with this The Architecture Machine, which you had this sort of rats into an artificial environment called SIG. So it was the first attempt to apply these notions to design. But also I found in my library these 2 books that influenced me very much. One was called Notes on the Synthesis of Form by Christoph Alexander. Actually, he got very hippie later, but this was full of mathematical formulas. And this is an article by Douglas Hofstadter. It's called Variations on a Themes as the Crux of Creativity. I will not sum up what these people are saying, but I would say that Christoph Alexander is saying is that what we recognize in that case as an A, it cannot be obtained just by a deformation with parametric views of the archetype of an A. We recognize all these NAs, but it's a cultural thing. Then he uses a Chinese character to show that what is clear for Chinese, they all represent, shop fronts characters, we would not. So he poses very interesting question. But we all are trying to have a process which gets to the result. That's the meaning. But in the end, do we have that? In the old times, in the École des Beaux-Arts, there's methods to get there. Step 1, you do the axis. Step 2, you put the columns, you put the walls, and then you get the building. In traditional societies, there were ways of doing things which were prescribed, and also the final form was quite prescribed. But today, if you type method on internet, everybody, as we have, diets, the ketogenic diet, the digiuno intermittente, whatever, everybody invents a diet and everybody invents a design method. We all should believe that in this processual way, the inputs are the data and the form is only the last one. So the metaphor of input, algorithm, or black box output, which was in a way the one with functionist thought, forms only arrive at last, is the product of a process. But all this view, which in a way is of the first modern machine age, does not see that we also cultural people and we copy. Many years ago, this is the house in Venice that I tried to fit in a context of Giudecca, but then the other day I was in Vienna and I said, oh, these are the Zucchi windows, and then I this sort of white cornice, but actually this I found in a hall of Polytechnic or some student doing exercises, but actually I originally copied from this one, which is a Gabetti Isola buildings from the 60s. So this copycat feeling, many years ago I did in Biennale an installation which was called Copycat, Empathy and Envy as Form Makers. I put sequences of objects, these are Rajasthan Chapati rollers, just to show that we don't start anew every time. This is very important. In the history of technique, these are Milano facades, we tend to reproduce and variate, as Douglas Hofstadter. In this evolutionary way to see things, evolution has many dead branches. Okay, so to get to the point, you have to fail many times. This I took some models from my desktop and showing almost a Darwinistic branching out to go to the final thing. But this variation, this is Vuccemas, he was a famous constructivist schools, as we do with students. How do we get there? Do we get there directly or by try again? Samuel Beckett used to say, try again, fail better. I think that failure is the node of the way we get there. Can we fail in a good way? This is also Fuseli, he was a painting. In art, many beautiful things are found by chance, but conserved by choice. This chance choice mechanism in life. I find my wife by chance, but I conserve her by choice, and we do it all the time. It's, to me, the fundamental thing. And even if we are looking at nature as something perfect, we always try the idea that nature produces perfect things. It's not true. You know, this is a famous book, Evolution et Bricolage, that says that nature is not a perfect machine. Natural evolution does exactly as we do. You know, we deform one kind of feature to get to a point. Very quickly, I'm saying that we have the illusion that natural forms are perfect. But the way we get there, these are some mathematicians which perfectly reproduce with an algorithm, a very simple algorithm, the decoration of a seashell, and in parametric ways you can both get, this is the real shell and the way you get it with artificial, you know, means. In a way, once you have a program, just changing a parameter, you can get to all of them. But Paul Valéry used to say, we like a shell as a human product, but the way we act is not the same. You know, the shell is perfect, but is only one. The mollusk only knows his own lectures. We have freedoms, the freedom of material, freedom of figure, freedom of choice. So the act of man is freedom. So this is the shell I like, is something like a bricolage, is a shell, it's called Xenophora pallidula, who picks everything on the ground to do the work. I'm almost finished, but now Dalé. No, all of a sudden something happens, and these are the two founding figures of Dalé. You know, in a way you start from a word, a prompt, something, make me a chair which looks like an avocado, or a snail harp. These are the not so many years ago, I think it's just a bunch of years ago. And what's changing completely, because it's not just producing out of the same thing, is, can you call it, is interpretation. So the different interpretation of a prompt I give. And you know, if we go on internet, this is a guy, he's called Neptune Glitterball. I think he does fantastic things. This is in my field of architecture. They're also very ironic, I think, with Midjourney. In this case, this is a famous, it's called Matias del Campo. He does all these experiments, you know, like zebra or neo-Gaudi or Gothic structures, you know, in this. And we see them all the time. This is actually a woman. I tried to get her name, but she wants to remain secret. She's a Torinese young architect, also experimenting with Midjourney, with some post-production. But in the end, this variation is not, to me, yet so far from what Joseph Frank, he was you know, an Austrian architect doing with fantasy houses, or I've been to the Biennale, and to me the most beautiful thing of the Biennale of years ago, I went through all of them, and then I got back, I wrote to Michele De Lucchia, said, of all I saw, I think this work was amazing. As MDL circle, to me, I mean, what's new in a way of this, would you call it free research, and in this case formal research and choice. So, but the danger I see with what you're saying, this I just put this slide 5 minutes ago. I said, when you go to these groups, it's called the Tokyo Hotel, the things, in a way now, you separate the figure, people who pretend they're playing, and some other group, well, not so pretty, they're not so teenagers. So these are teenager idols, in this case in Japan, who are just pretending they play with somebody playing the back. Will we have people, Fabio Novembre, cool people who look, they have the right face, you know, like, in a way, Rita Levi Montalcini, we don't know what she invented, but she has the look of the scientist. So Morgan Freeman, Fabio Novembre, Rita Levi Montalcini will be, you have the look of the designer, and somebody in the back, in this case AI, you can distinguish, will make the job. This could be one danger of it. So I would give, I never use Midjourney, I also want to start, I will give these prompts. Brian Eno, in maybe 30 years ago, he was actually quite interested also in intelligence. He wrote this, he has like a tarot of, they call oblique strategies, and it's a deck of cards where when you have formal dilemmas, you pick one. These are, each card has a name, and all these are things which are written. So you can, It's like the book of answers, consider, transition, courage, decorate, decorate. I think these are good for all the arts. So I would, as soon as I have time, open Midjourney, and I will give these. They are all Brian Eno's instructions. Don't avoid what is easy. Discover your own formulas, abandon them, emphasize the flaws, find a safe part and use it as an anchor. Oh, they're all cool. So we will meet next year to see what Shinozuki and AI will do with that. Use an old idea, use cliches, use filters, use something nearby as a model. I thank you for your patience, and we're all wondering what will happen of us. A friend of mine said, "See, Chino, I am an electrical engineer. The first machine age partially substitute people in labor. Now, people like us who know things, the person in the next 10 years will not be somebody who knows things, but we will know how to put the right question to AI. So let's see us in 10 years. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Thank you. Let me welcome also Team Fu. Welcome. And just for the ones of you who don't know, Team Fu is architectural designer as Zaha did, architects, Zacode AI. So welcome. Talking about prompting, I would prompt you, Carlos, to share a little bit of your experience with AI so far.
Sure. Okay. Yes. All right. So, well, amazing presentation, Drew. I really enjoyed, and I think the sequence is coming in the right point because I'm going to talk about Midjourney. So just take it from you left it, and I'm going to share some of the latest. Well, I'm going to start from the beginning, actually. So the first part is going to be about embracing the uncertainty. So I'm going to talk more about Midjourney and how unpredictable it is. But the first slide I use here is actually just the opposite. I'm showing a pavilion that I finished in Singapore, and for me encapsulates the control that we can achieve when we design and manufacture. So we 3D print, and this is a 3D printed node in stainless steel. So every ounce of the material is deliberately placed based on algorithms. So we have control of materials, we have control of structure, control of space. So this pavilion, it's kind of feeling that you have control of all the elements, and also evokes some certain ideas on ethereal architecture and likeness. So when Midjourney appeared, right, middle of 2022, for me it was like the perfect occasion to really stress those ideas I was working with. And then Midjourney was, wow. I mean, we can put concepts of likeness and slenderness, and we take it to a whole new dimension. So this was Midjourney 3, and the graphics that you can see are not fully realistic, but to me, gave me that sense of like, I don't care. I'm fine with what I get here because the texture, the feel is there. I can try to put my thoughts into prompts, and somehow they come in an unexpected way. So I was quite comfortable with that level of uncontrolled outcome. So, well, this is a small part in which I talk about the prompt, right? I mean, maybe how we used to talk to AI, right? I think we have different ways, we have found different methods. But the one thing that Midjourney allows is that we can actually be right now designing. We have sent a prompt before we started, and then later we get the phone, we get feedback, we continue. So it's portable, the interface is just very handy. So it gets actually addictive. So how does a prompt work? Well, it's not like a very rigorous way to put it, but let's say when you write something, you are somehow evoking some references from your prompt. Let's say talking about the installation, in this case, Janet Etchelman, some choreography, movement, action, wind, texture, materials. Somehow it comes together in a way that we don't know, but comes together, producing a complete new original image. So this basically is the result of the prompt. And from there is not the end, typically it's the beginning. We keep iterating, we keep adding maybe a second prompt. So we can punch the prompt from one side, we can try to tame, we have levers somehow to modify. And moving forward, we also have weights. So the words can be weighted. You can actually add a weight to the word to have more relevance in the prompt. So that, for instance, this one is the female flamenco dancer has a tree for the weight, so it's all about her, right? The background doesn't care. So then the way we structure the prompts, I mean, there are many parts and blocks. I mean, it's not a science about that. It's like basically you learn by doing and getting the result. But you can say some constants in there. And these are my very early explorations with ethereal architecture. It was August in 2022. And creating some 2.5D animations from the images. The idea was to try to, because we as architects, we want to go inside. And the image is 2D, so we want to get there. So still, I was talking before about the text to 3D that will come soon. But in the meantime, we need to find workflows to get it. So in this one is a very straightforward way to use the Z depth map of an image to create immersive 3D model. That's done in minutes, and then you can go inside, and from the image you get a certain landscape you can actually walk. So it's actually quite exciting to see that we have created an image. In only a few minutes you can go inside, and somehow it makes sense. So I use Midjourney to fuel my obsessions in architecture. So architecture and integration with the ground, with the mountain, being the mountain, utilizing resources. So immediately after creating a Midjourney prompt, I do a section. So it really boosts my imagination, which I think is really great, what we can do with AI. And then Midjourney 4 appeared, and then the challenge here was to try to keep the consistency throughout the production of the interiors. So in this case, I'm trying to make sense of the interior spaces of this mountain, but I want to keep consistency throughout the living room or the pockets of space that are designed. And here I explore more a close-up of the conceptual porosity using sand and aggregations of units, which for me was quite insightful to test these ideas and to get that kind of quality and fineness and grain in the images. And of course, trying to integrate AI in any occasion. This is a prototype for Louis Vuitton of a facade, in which I introduce as well a variation, an integration with existing context that was quite well received. Also addressing the complexity of the connections, the 3D printed node I showed at the beginning. This is also a question that I posed to Midjourney, and the results are extremely elegant and beautiful. But of course, we know that Midjourney doesn't work with structural data. But somehow the data sets contain information from projects that have been actually calculated properly. So I think there's some statics, there's some embedded data that comes out there, but it's not, of course, calculated. So that's one thing that we don't do yet with AI, especially Midjourney, but definitely will be integrated. This Midjourney 5, some latest explorations on cabins. This is a project we're doing in Mexico, and then exploring in a real context with cantilevers and simple geometries. Also the grain. Here we are using a feature remix that allows to mix different images, and the outcome is now quite impressive in version 5. Exploring the work of other architects like Enrique Miralles and how we can use his style in producing amazing spaces, or personal investigations on 3D printing of furniture with upcycled plastic. But in this series, I'm looking not just at the object, but also at the user or even at the artist behind. Midjourney can really portray that in a perfect way. So it's amazing how to get back this interaction of people with places like this constructed ground, or these cavernous spaces, or that can be actually functional like these potential restaurants, or tectonic operations or Boolean operations like this one inspired by Gordon Matta Clark in such a strong and raw way, right? It's like you get actually almost like a perfect picture of that. And small explorations on remixing past projects to create proto-architectures, also quite interesting approach using Midjourney. The second part, maybe it's a bit more boring because we want to take control, right? So in the end, after like getting and open up so many options, in the end, we want to close it. We want to build it. So, I mean, still the gap is there. We don't have a workflow that works for everything. But here I'm presenting some work on Stable Diffusion. Stable Diffusion is not so intuitive. We don't have it on the phone. We need a computer. We need proper graphics card. It requires power. It requires learning curve. But we have sliders. We have levers. We can control it more. We can use information. So this prompt, for instance, here is a very generic prompt for a museum. I mean, it could be anywhere. But now I'm going to insert gradually, step by step, the information from a 3D model. So what we see here through this iteration is the 3D model taking the prompt to a certain place, which is this one here. So this space is actually a 3D model in a 3D software like Rhino, in a very simple manner, like using surfaces, but the information of the space can be pushed into the AI and then can be combined with the prompt. So it's a way that at some point we can speculate around a certain design that is solid, and we can move around with certain margins. We can change the light, we can change the atmosphere, the materials, the vibe, the reflections, the light. And next step was, okay, I'm going to try with my own work. So I revisit my 360-degree house in Madrid, and well, this is the built project, but I had the 3D model, right? So I used the 3D model to create the Z-depth map, and then with that, I was exploring different scenarios, like, okay, a node or with little budget, how was the house would have been built, or in different contexts, like with the roof. And we actually can speculate quite fast and get results, and also, of course, change the point of view and try to keep the consistency throughout the images, right? So it's like a powerful tool, even for your own designs and to see different scenarios. This is a small exploration on design studios that I teach in SUTD. So some students were working some geometries that didn't have a function assigned. So here the question mark was the function. So it's a generic geometry, but then with the prompts, you can change the character. It could be a train station or like an old train station. It could be an airport. And suddenly the colors start to appear with the same geometry, so students get close to the atmosphere crafting by using words, which I think is quite inspiring, or could become an open structure for a park. Many possibilities here, right? This is a exploration on working with things that stay, like using the image on the right. So keeping track of what means for AI using colors, and then basically it's talking about the context, how influences the potential cladding of the building. By changing the context, the building will react to it. So it's always about autonomy of the program, but also how it responds to the context, right? So AI does a really good job on blending and finding character from the surroundings. So the last part is related to sketching. I think, Tim, maybe you will talk about that. I don't know. I think
not long enough for me to be able to put it in my PDF. But I wish I could have.
But he has amazing work on that. So I mean, I just touched surface here. So basically, I'm showing some of the drawings that we know from Sejima, right? This drawing, and then the question is like, if Sejima had AI, and you have the open question at the beginning, but with AI you can have actually the last image almost real time. So how the design workflow can change. And in this case, out of the sketch, you're going to start getting instant results with the prompts that are sometimes quite convincing. So using and creating atmospheres that are evoked from the sketch is quite a powerful tool. And that can be applied also at very early stages. And then to finish this small talk, the last part is talking about, our roles in architecture, right? I mean, when we draw a line, that line could be anything, right? But we know when we're drawing a line, so many things embedded in that line. So this is kind of an inspiration on how can we charge with prompts those lines to make sense of it. Yeah. So this one line, and then with the prompt, we are doing something with the line. So the line could be a path. We can do another line, becomes a system. So we keep building using lines and have new meanings. In this case, I'm extracting volume with the prompts. Or could be articulation, the same lines, or could be segregation. So the meaning is definitely what we charge the prompt with. Could be structuring the ground and creating a walk system. Or something that is more wrapping spaces, creating open atmospheres, or merging them into a larger communal space. In a way that become immersive. braided, and woven. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. I think, David, it's now your turn to share some of your experience and thinking around the topic.
Yeah, with pleasure. Yeah, I think we just see how powerful this tool is. It's probably one of the most powerful tools we have ever had in the architectural field. And now we're still a tool. We are very curious of what's after. It's not just a tool, and maybe it can be something else. Our collective has been founded by Michele De Luc. Like 5 years ago, he really found the need of saying, I want this thing that has been always very authorial to become much more of a collective. It was a thought really related to this changing, this changement that is not just about, it's really about the role of the author, and how the role of the author can generate other things, and things that has been generated, let's say, by our collective today. And it's a collective that is really trying to push every field of architecture, all with the same. So it's architecture, it's installation, it's product. We really try to put all this different knowledge in the same place, with the same amount of people, with the same amount of interest, I would say. So, and all of these are going to influence the way we work. So the graphic is influencing our architecture, the architecture is going to influence our graphic, and this with this strong balance, I would say. And then we believe that AI is going to be part of this collective thinking. In this moment, we are starting to work on a research. Cino just showed us, didn't know, thanks, one of our last research that was about this Earth Station project, so like visionary architecture. A lot of the work we do in our studio is about research. Michele De Luc himself is dedicating his time to this research. And we thought that we should have started using AI to design nothing, to design emptiness. So in this moment, we are developing a research that is partially research, partially is going to be visuals, and it's made with several different output. And we thought it would have been, I don't know, interesting to say, let's start from scratch. Not design building, let's design where the buildings are not, or where we want to remove building and just put emptiness again. It's a research that probably is going to get out by the end of the year, but that's how, again, we try to say, how can we use this tool in our way to doing our type of research. And again, it's very similar to what Cino shows about our research today. Okay, just to prepare this slide, I just put the prompt in DALL-E, and just see what was coming out. One topic is really, in this idea of collective that we have, we really would love, and we hope somehow, that AI can be one more chair at our table. No, it can be when we design something. It's all of us. It's several people, several singularities. That bring their own ideas and their own opinions. And some of us are more intelligent, some of us are more smart. But each of us is very relevant. Even the young guys that just arrived in the studio, we want to talk to him. So probably this AI will be more intelligent than all of us. But I think it's important that us, probably a bit more stupid than the AI itself, will bring our content. So we think that we hope it can be, we have no answer, that's what we love, but it can be something about this. Another question that we ask is, and we find it's really relevant, is we feel that today probably we are in this moment I feel it's just before a revolution, but we are not in the revolution. We are really in a moment of re-evolving something. Probably one of the most relevant, I would say, architect of our time. He didn't do architecture, but for sure is one that really shaped the year 2010, and it's Virgil Abloh. His thought was really this about, okay, I have a 3% approach. I like objects when are slightly modified from an object that already exists. So and I said it has to be 3%, not more, not less. And I find newness only in this type of approach. Of course, it's not what we've also did, it's not what Cino did, it's not what everybody did here. But for sure, I think this way of thinking of Virgil Abloh and a lot of contemporary architects and artists has shaped the last, I would say, 10 years of making design. And in this point, AI arrived as a perfect tool, because that's nothing that changes the 3% better really than the introduction of the AI. So we see that this tool is becoming more and more powerful. So I really feel that we are ready for this revolution. We were talking with Michele De Lucchi a lot about the Memphis time. No? Okay, would AI have generated something like Memphis? That was really not like a consequence of something. No? And probably it will. It's not today, but I hope we are getting close to this moment. I mean, we try to be, we want to be revolutionary, so we hope that this moment is almost ready, even for the market. But you see the chairs that are winning prizes today and the one that win in the 80s, it's very relevant, the type of radical thought that is on it. Yeah? So in this moment, the AI works perfectly. I hope it can evolve even more into that. And then there is one more thing that we are very interested in. No? Okay, now AI is a tool, and then we say, okay, maybe AI can become one of the components of our circle, of our collective. No? But again, and I really want, I mean, I will be very quick. So I want to really close with this text of Ettore Sossas. No, that's we strongly believe it. I read it and I want to say a few things. So it said, as far as I'm concerned, what matters more in artists is their lives. Just as for everyone, only life is what matters, not works. Everyone ought to tell their life story at all, the time and write immense diaries, or rather everyone owes to just live. I mean to be aware that one is living. Works are roaming corpses. What I really want to know is what sort of life was lived by every pile of dust in every tomb, in every necropolis around the world. That's why I never visit museum, and when I do, I'm overcome by boundless melancholy. I think all of that must have been behind the work I see. I think for us as architects, but I think for everybody, that's really a very relevant question. Again, no answer. I just have questions probably for all of you. But I think that's the topic. We see even in the client that come to us, in the people that come to us, they want to join us, to talk to us, to have dinner with us. They fall in love with our way of talking, of moving, of being human. No? And so it's not the product itself. It's just, I mean, there's no story in the product. It's in what generates, and it's not in what. It's in who. And there are products that we've designed in a certain moment, they were like that because we were very sad. Or because in the office we were some trouble and some product came out. And then we have some totally different one and in a very different mood of the office. Or when there were different things happening. So the result of our collective work is a lot influenced by our own life. You know? And we feel that even the client and everybody is really strongly interested in that part that is there. It is not, because the output at the end is just to be an image, you know? It's just a story, it's just a prompt, you know? It's really, okay, even if it is prompt, what stimulates that prompt? What is the guy that decided to write that prompt in that way was thinking, was living, was hoping, you know? So that's where I am very curious to see where we're getting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And team.
Yes.
We would love to hear also about some of your experience with AI.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a 2-hour delay on the flight, so thank God I made it.
You hear?
Yeah. So yeah, from my point of view, architecture in the age of AI. Just before all the AI stuff, you know, I like to just emphasize that I specialize in parametric architecture and geometry, and that's the type of stuff I do in my office at Zaha Hadid as well as prior offices. So at Zaha Hadid Code, our computational department, we also have a legacy of working with artificial intelligence. And so this goes within the umbrella term of artificial intelligence beyond just the recent diffusion model. So obviously we had the projects with Rafik Anadol, which was learning the data set of Zaha Hadid and trying to see how a machine can regenerate that type of things. And then we also had different types of AI, like working with calculating force flow in the project for the Mathematics Museum. And then we had the more recent build project BIA in Sharjah, which is a net zero energy efficient system that is completely kind of operated with AI. So it just goes to show how AI is very broad, and the terms that we use can be more interchangeable, and it's an umbrella term. So we have obviously keen interest within our team to continue to do this type of research. So currently, in my point of view, I've been working as Zaha Hadid Code partially to do this type of research on top of doing build projects and designing in detail. So this is the more research-oriented side of our office. And it's quite interesting because we're kind of just given our own freedom to really look into the direction that we think is the most viable. So I've been looking at it from a very, I guess, methodical point of view, and deploying kind of a lot of the systems that was taught to me by Zaha Hadid Code, how we systematically analyze and try to quantify and find all the essential systems that do exist in this seemingly chaotic system of AI. So I've been studying how, for example, to generate parametric facade, because I'm also in the parametric facades team, and we're trying to see how AI can really basically empower us to provide more options a lot quicker and give us ideation tool in the process. So beyond my office, personally, I've been doing a lot of AI exploration on my own, I guess. So that's kind of like the social media side of things was quite interesting because I started this less than a year ago, and I guess with the whole social media enabling us to really share ideas very rapidly, AI kind of came in at the very right time. And so I feel like, Carlos, I'm sure you do as well, right? It's a very nice marriage of the two, how AI is a very visual ideation tool, and then you have social media as a way to really showcase this idea to the public. So with that, I've gained a lot of traction in this research. So from my side, I wanted to really showcase a lot of the stuff that I've done on my own. When Midjourney started version 3, I started here on the very left, and as we move to the right, you can see when Midjourney continue progressing, the technology progresses, and my output becomes increasingly more realistic and better. And this just goes to show because my design ethos remain the same, my goal remain the same, but then you can see the progress of the AI itself, how much it changes just by this chronology. And this is just less than a year, so just imagine what it's going to be like next year or the year after. And so here's one of my latest works, just to show how I've been experimenting with very simple commands of colors and parametric walls, just to see how that sort of color morphology is basically interpreted by the AI and then kind of like reproduced as an outcome. And it's quite interesting because this is very hands-off type of approach. I have some projects I do where I have very keen intentions on how it's supposed to be outputted, and then there are some projects like these which are just incredibly explorative. You just kind of put very few prompts. Like some of these you see have 5, 6, 7 words, and I find it to be rather interesting. So the less words you have, the more you allow it to kind of ideate for you in that sense. And then some of these are a little more fine-tuned, I would say. So part of the reason I also started getting into AI was there was a huge inundation at around July and August when a lot of people were just posting tons of stuff with AI. And one of the things that I did notice is a lot of people put designed by Zaha Hadid. And they've all done it in their own interpretation, and I've just seen crazy wacky shapes, chairs with 1,000 spikes and things like that. And I kind of wanted to give a little my input as well, because I guess at least from my experience as a Hadid, I feel like there is some things that I've learned that I can really use to contribute to the discourse of this design exploration. So this is, for example, one of the projects where I try to really incorporate some of the design ethos that is instilled in me within the code and Zaha Hadid, to try to see how we can generate forms that are more soft, but also intentional. And then of course there are projects that require a very specific output. So this one obviously is inspired heavily by Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. And for a project like this to be, to conjure up the exact imagery you want, you have to really prompt it in such a exact way. Or else, for example, the images on the right you can see is already starting to spin off in different directions. So there's very different approaches in prompting to achieving different results. But the idea of just being able to, prompt in incredible masterpieces just at the touch of a button and then find livable environments immediately, I find that to be extremely enticing. And that's partly why, for me, it's like an addiction. I pretty much Midjourney 24/7 for my own benefit, just for myself as well. Beyond research, it is extremely meditative, kind of like, your little artistic moment. And of course, the ability to go in all different scales, to explore urban scales, from urban to product, it's incredibly versatile. Here, for example, product exploration, vehicle design, you can pretty much, I think, anything you can think of that you want to do at the moment, you could get to it close enough to a certain extent where you feel like you can really input your own artistic narrative within different domains of art and design. So now it comes to the methodology. I'll just touch about that briefly a bit. I think it's interesting to see that there's like a dichotomy of the two, right? There is the hard skill set that we talk about, how to prompt, how to word things correctly to get the computer to prompt out the database that's correct for your use. But then there's also things like the visual acumen of the creator itself, the ideation process, and how to creatively problem solve when you're given a tool that no one has really invested so much time into exploring. So we're kind of like all in the front line when we're exploring this. It's extremely novel, and so we have to kind of be figure things out on the spot. So sentence structuring was one of the things that I looked at heavily in the early stages when Midjourney 3 and 4 came out. But I think as we progress, this became less important. But more so important is the word position and association. So for the ones that are a little more advanced, you probably will see that when you're prompting, the words that are associated closer to each other generate a set of prompting databases that comes out as a certain result. So not just the chronology, but kind of like the relative spacing of the words to each other allows you to prompt the results you want. So even though there are, just 20 words on the screen, if you scramble them, you get very different results. So even the mere fact of just placing them in different ways allow you to have so much control over this. And it's not as easy as it seems for people who haven't truly gone into the depth of it. I think it's easy to think that you can just put a whole bunch of text and just let it roll. But then when you start building the text to get what you want, then you realize, wow, one letter away and I get a totally different result. So I find that to be also incredibly interesting. Other further techniques of prompt crafting that I won't get into because there's just too much. So yeah, some of these projects I've done, you can see this is version 4. So the starting point is at the bottom and then the final results at the top. When you start, you build the prompt craft, it's a few words, and you slowly shift your way. So you can see that the gradual improvement truly exists as you put more time and effort in and your own curation into it. So that's the human element that you can insert to further improve AI's prompts. So I think it's kind of like a logarithmic graph where initially it improves quite a lot as you improve, and then you start to like slow down as you put more text until it's finally kind of like, all right, this is what I think is the best it can achieve at the moment, and then that's what I showcase. Yeah. So another interesting aspect is how both social media and AI has allowed a new form of collaboration. For example, with Luca Curci Architects, we've worked on this kind of like utopian floating city concepts. And this is still kind of like the early phases of Midjourney when they're kind of a bit of unresolved geometry. But what's interesting is we're able to really create a lot of livable spaces. We're an idea of livable spaces in the future. And I find that to be quite interesting. And then you have different domains. When the CEO of Sprayground came to me, which is a bag company, we wanted to collaborate and see how we can manage to work with AI and produce some of the aesthetics that I have and the design that the ethos that I have, the kind of like Zaha Hadid vibes. But then you also have backpack. You know, it's a product. It's for the young and it's funky. So how do we kind of merge the two? And I found myself to be kind of like in the middle where I can now start to bring in the design ethos of what I've learned in architecture and actually start to really just transfer that directly into product design and other types of design. So I find that to be incredibly interesting that we can actually just jump to different domains very rapidly and showcase our design values through just prompting and providing different results. And of course, I've done other types of collaboration as well. Recently, also with the Italian furniture company, Mavimat as well. But I haven't had time to put it all here. But there's so many different things that we can do now with AI because it's so versatile that I think it really opens the door to different types of collaboration that didn't exist prior. I think obviously we've talked about this a lot, is how we're talking about getting it into 3D, getting the building built. So right now there's a lot of AI ways, and as sophisticated as they are, I think there is the level of control that traditional modeling that we have with parametric modeling and scripting, algorithmic computation that really allows us to really seal the deal with a finite geometry. And with a lot of these things that the visualization is produced by AI, I think we are able to at least rationalize it because they kind of developed it from a database of rational geometry. So even though the early stages are quite irrational, I think the later stages of the AI, they allow ourselves to generate really realistic geometry that we can rationalize ourselves. So I think part of my struggle is also trying to rationalize it manually as the kind of the informed designer, engineer, architect. So overall, I think there's a paradigm shift really happening here. For example, the prompt crafting, going into image representation, going into directly going to a final product instead of modeling it yourself. And then there is potentially in the very near future, going directly from prompt crafting to 3D models and 3D spaces that we can inhabit. So I think we are shortening that loop and that connection. We're reducing the amount of the human manual labor in this process, but we are increasing, I think, the ideation process. We're allowing ourselves to become more superpowered in a sense, to be kind of co-creators with the machine and humans, to be able to design as a holistic process. So just to conclude, I will just quote very quickly, generated by ChatGPT. AI is not yet able to fully replicate the creativity and intuition of the human designer. So while AI can assist the design process, it is still important for human designers to be involved in the overall creative process. So ironically, even ChatGPT, the AI, welcomes us. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd say very insightful, all of your inputs, your prompts to the conversation, talking about prompts. I've been taking many notes and keywords from all of your interesting stories and experience. Now, looking forward, we know this is going fast as we speak, but what do you think? The gains are pretty clear. What do you think we're losing from this speed and this new tool or conscious entity? Because this is still very unclear. Some of you mention it as a tool, some of you as somebody else on a table, so almost like a conscious presence. So if we move forward, what do you think are the gains and what are we losing in a way?
Without being nostalgic, the other day I walk in my studio, I asked who El Greco, a famous painter, was. 30 people in the studio didn't know. Then I said, this is the other day, the crisis of Cuba. My generation know perfectly, my secretary don't know. And then my daughter does not know who Borromini is, but that's not the problem, because today with Wikipedia, if somebody has an iPhone, Borromini, born in 1624. So it's the first generation where knowledge of facts is independent from process in a way. We study things and to get there, but today you can know who Aristotle is without knowing who Platone. But when we are talking of what is culture, okay? I remember a very famous lecture of Ernst Gombrich. He was in the Sheldonian Theater. He said, when we're talking about the history of art in Western societies, we need axioms. In this case, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo are, like in Euclid's theory, the axioms. If we start rediscussing that, we could get everywhere. And then he says, civilization is something you cannot teach in a university course ending up with exams. Civilization is a set of values which are implicit rather than explicit. I have a very international class and I'm saying to them, today, what is good and bad manners, social codes? Are the one we find in a lobby of a Dubai airport. An airport is a somehow extraterritorial place. Certain gesture of well-being, like please, to offer food, to be gentle, are universal. Each place has different social codes. For example, I was in Dubai, I was sitting like that, said, Chino Zucchi, do not enter the meeting with that, and they explained me that in Dubai, if you show the soul of your things, you're dead. In Japan, the angle of the ladies going in kino, it's representing social conditions. So, after Andy Warhol, we are producing something new. In a way, AI is touching Leonardo da Vinci's dream of, in a way, understanding the geometry of nature. A pixel movie, you see the flock of birds, the flames. We are touching Leonardo da Vinci's dream and Galileo Galilei's dream. This is amazing because we have the mathematics of nature, of natural events, a waterfall. And this is almost shocking for us because it never happened. On the other side, what can we call today, I'm not talking about culture, about the relationship between forms and social codes, the way we use things, not just to sit on, but also as communication tools. This is sort of, let's for a moment say, this is a variation of a classical shoe, okay, it's done by Paraboot, and has some kind of typology in it. And then a man will know if this is half a centimeter too much is different. If you take, I'm joking a bit, a Zaha Hadid sneaker, it's something in a way totally new, but we don't know yet how to place it in terms of social codes. I mean, sneakers in general, yes, but we cannot use it as a social element in search of communication in symbolic ways. It will be, in a way, if I go to the Scala tonight, I can wear an analog watch, but I don't yet have a digital watch, which is an elegant, in a way, the jewel for a man. Maybe, Apple Watch tried to do the version. So when these experiments go back, not just to be forms, but also to be exchange, somehow they go back to a system of social exchange, I wonder the relationship between AI and our social codes. I don't know if it was clear, it was quite complicated, but somehow repetition, it's super experimental, but then the way we interpret things is still semiological. I would say we interpret things. For example, do we like this sofa we're sitting on? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe can tell us, do I like his jacket? I mean, if we look at each other's socks or sneakers or this, we are judging other people because of very fine things, the way we dress, or the shape of our glasses. Imagine how glasses are cosmetic. That's what I expect AI to understand. It's very interesting, I don't know.
I think this is like one of those things that we as designers ourselves are responsible for, right? Because what we have is a database of all existing things created by designers, other designers, within the semiological framework of human values that you've talked about. So every chair, every sofa that is in the database has existed and created by a designer skillfully, with consideration to the social dynamic of the use of that chair or couch, love seat or sofa. And so then when we have that assortment of database to work from, we're kind of like exploring it's like a market of social values that exist within the database. So if I'm playing on your narrative, it's kind of like saying like, you know, because that social value is embedded within the design visually. So when we're prompting it, we're actually prompting the social values and the design ethos of the designers in the past. So because it's not a completely chaotic system where it's creating pixels out of noise, it's creating pixels out of things that we cataloged. And things we cataloged as humans, predominantly good things will come out. If there's poor design, it would not be the kind of the majority of the design database within Midjourney or these type of AI softwares. So while I think it's a strength that we are bound by the existing image database of AI, so that gives us a little bit of footing within our creation to not go beyond to do the, you know, the vulgar or the socially unacceptable things to an extent. But at the same time, I think it's also limiting because the existing the database of images, both by instilling like you said, the structure and the values that already exist, by forcing us to work with it, that we also have a limitation to not be able to explore the chaos side of it. So I think it's a bit of the two. I think on my side, I try to also push the uncertainty a little bit and then bring it back, push it out and then bring it back. So refine it within my context of my understanding of what I think is valuable as a design. So I think it's a back and forth and it's continuous. Yeah.
So it seems like
I think that together with the social value things, the other half of all of this is architecture is how you made it. You know? So as deciding how to make a building is not just the shape. Is I want to use wood, I want to use less wood, I want to consume less, and so make it with a specific form. So the combination of the formal idea and the one of the way of constructing it, especially I think in this moment where attention of consuming material, building less, really thinking about sustainability, it's all in how you make things. Now, it's all in the details. A lot of shape that we create comes before of a construction typology, or a way of making this building. And I think this is the other aspect in which the AI needs to combine with making real things. This piece is this beautiful because there is this particular machine that can shape this. You cannot shape another one. You can just shape this type of form. So I think that's another part of the process that we really have to combine. I mean, at least for us, the two things comes together. How you make it, and I don't know. Now we are trying to make a house that, like very very old house, only made in wood, even without any chemical, and even without any bit of concrete. Even just not for the foundation. So I think those things will take, I would say, 80% of the design decision, because then the rest is a consequence of all these decisions that are related to how you build, what materials you're making, how you are not using certain glue, whatever, etc. So I think that it will be very good to see how we can combine this super powerful visual image with this aspect of crafting, of making, of details of construction that are strongly big part of our work. Together with the social and the cultural value that this table represent, this sofa represent, this jacket represent.
we haven't even touched on the let's say the weight, the weight of all of this digital production. It does weight. We all know that, but this will take us to a completely different talk. We'll leave it for the next one. But just to conclude, Carlos, so we've been talking a lot about these endless opportunities. So anything can be done based on a seducing mix of existing material to create something new. But what is the limit? Who decides where to stop? Or who decides, who makes the final decision on these endless layers of opportunities?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really on-point question, because I think the shift is happening, right? And now I heard the word a few times today. I mean, we are now becoming even more curators of the information we're working with, because somehow we are moving to a higher level. So some tasks that were done before won't be done anymore by humans. I mean, I'm sure that, as interns, everyone spent like many days or weeks like solving this floor plan, the doors, blah, blah. I mean, this is gonna be gone. I mean, there are many things that some tasks are gonna be definitely out of the human touch maybe, but we need to remain relevant as architects and also keep the curatory role as architects to really mix the different parts, and in the end to add the value. I mean, as we talked before, we are actually using data generated by us, and we are tied to it. So the contribution that we can add to that is actually moving forward in the future. So I think we are the ones in the end. So I think we will be still relevant in the way that we need to integrate it because all the AI models, I mean, now we're looking at the image generation, but we're talking about energy, we're talking about structure. Many others are going to come together. So at some point, there will be a certain role of curation that I think we will need to own somehow.
Awesome. I would say thank you so much for your insightful contribution. We got a lot to think about, and this is, of course, in progress. So I thank you again for your time and your contribution, and we'll see each other in the next talk
Thank you.
tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.